Saw dudes, and welcome to another raw photo critique. And today we're looking at another photograph from Mallory Neal Photography, and here it is. So it's a portrait of two people standing on a bridge. So here's the raw photo. It's very similar to the JPEG. It looks like Mallory raised the warmth of the photograph along with a little bit of a crop and made sure that the highlights and shadows and everything was a little bit more concise. But out of this photo, I would say that it is a little too dark. There's not as much detail as you can see around these areas in the face. It seems to be a little bit more taken away from of the raw file. With that being said, it doesn't seem like it's actually properly exposed. The raw image seems to be a little bit better exposed than the processed image. And along with looking at the raw image, you can tell that the photograph isn't focused on the eyes. So when you're photographing portraits, you want the first person, the one in front of you, or the one closest to the lens, to be the one with their eyes in focus. And in this case, you would want his right eye to be in focus because it's the closest one to the camera. Now her eyes are in focus to a certain extent, but like I said, you want the closest person to the lens to have their eyes in focus. The colors of the wardrobe are pretty nice as they mesh together, as they're all sort of a pastel-y faded color, like from the black to this tan to this flatter blue. And then there's not really other distractions in the background as well. You have a train or a subway in the background here, and that's about it. You have all these awesome lines going on in the background that create great depth between them and whatever they're looking at to the side. Now, normally, if you have people in a photograph and they're looking to a certain direction, like they're looking this way, you would want them to be posed on this side because the space would be filling here. But for this specific photograph, I like how these lines create like a nice bokeh and bring some extra depth to the photograph, and it sort of gives you a like New York City or swept away kind of feel. Also, it looks like the styling is pretty good. Nothing is too distracting. There's no flyaways, so you luckily didn't get a windy day. And overall, it's just a nice frame. Now, one thing that could be distracting to certain people is this bar coming right through his head, or the same thing with this bar going right through the center of him. It could be competing with them in the foreground. This looks like a light that for the cars driving across this bridge, and I like how it's not exposed, so you did a good shutter speed. So let's look at the settings, which you can look over here or over here. There's an ISO of 125, which makes sense, to a 42mm f4.5 and 1/100th of a second. So it looks like you got the shutter speed very well done with the focal length and being double of the millimeter, so there shouldn't be any camera shake. With the f4.5, that might be why your depth is a little bit too low depending on the lens that you're using. With the aperture of f4.5, it doesn't seem like your depth of focus is too low with her eyes being in focus, but I would say with this lens that you're using, the 18 to 135, because it has a large range, I would try to shoot at f5.6, as that's going to probably be your sharpest aperture, around f8. With all that being said, let's get into the edit. So let's take it over to the develop tab, and I'm going to get rid of this extra info on the left side. So like I did in the last video, always go down to transform, throw down auto, try to get it lined up as properly as I can. This looks like it needs a little bit of a vertical adjustment. -5 is too much. Let's try -2. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then it looks like it also needs a little bit of a rotate. So I'd say like 1% might do pretty well on this photograph. Actually, let's take that back. You can, if you want to zero it out, you just click on the slider. So let's say you put it all the way up to 6. You can just double click and it'll go back. So that looks actually pretty good. We'll go to lens correction and always chromatic aberration and then distortion. And that seemed to fix the rest of the problems that I was looking at for the transform. And then yeah, let's go up to the basic tab. For this photograph, I'd probably pull it up a little bit more with the exposure to what looks like 0.15. Bring the highlights down just to bring a little bit more detail in. And then I'll always bring the shadows up a little and then crunch the blacks, as that'll give you the best contrast. a little bit of clarity to add and bring more detail to the foreground. Pop up the exposure 2 more clicks, push some contrast, and then we'll pull the dehaze back actually a little just to make their faces not be so dark. And then we'll go down to the tone curve. I'll pull up the shadows a little bit more and bring down the highlights to give them more detail. Very subtly though, we don't want it to be too over dramatic. And then push the contrast some more. It's always a give and go. You don't want it to be too much of one thing and too little of the other. You always want to be readjusting and making sure that things are being balanced and really pushing what they should be. And then if we want to take this into a different tone, we'll take it into the split toning. And let's say we want the tones to be a little bit warmer like Mallory's at it. We can push it over to a yellow and push the saturation up a little bit and then readjust it so it matches the tonality a little bit better, and then play with the balance a little, bring it a little out just to always keep that balance. And then let's say we want to put some yellow into shadows. We'll push the hue to a similar range as the highlights and push the saturation until it looks just right. I try to go as minimal as possible when doing that just to like create a nice correct color balance. The same with going down to the calibration. So let's say we're going to mess with the tint. I would go a little greener on the tint just to even it out a little more. Actually, let's see. A good way to judge is going all the way to extreme or going all the way to the extreme the other way and seeing what you think looks best. So yeah, we'll just do a little bit of green and then it looks good. And then with faces, we can grab the radial gradient over here and dragging it to the size of their faces. And with that, we can adjust their faces a little bit more to be a little bit more exact so that nothing's really off. Just as you saw, added a little bit of contrast, exposure, took down the highlights some and brought up the shadows some. Nothing really crazy. Click done. Let's grab another one. Do it for the girl's face. Just try to make sure that the hair is not getting adjusted too much. And of course, you can always do the luminance mask. So let's grab this. Let's bring it up a little. Make her face a little bit more pronounced. But always balancing it out so that there's not too much of a change from this area to her face, but just enough that it changes it. And then we'll bring in a feather a little bit with the hair, and with this luminance mask we'll be able to adjust it a little bit more exactly. And then I think this photo could be cropped a little bit more. I know I was enjoying these lines in the background, but I feel like these corners could be a little bit tighter. Nothing crazy, just bringing it down to like even there with like a small little portion and lining it up with this line on the edge so there's nothing really going out and making you feel like your eye is going to be pulled this way whenever they're the main subject and they're looking this way. And then see how that just evens it up. So if we do the before and after, you can really see how that really makes it a little bit more symmetrical and brings it all together and keeps it confined within this space rather than pulling out this way. Alright, yeah, so that's all I would do in Lightroom. Let's take it over to Photoshop. Alright, we have the image here in Photoshop, and I don't really do too much to images in Photoshop with a portrait, as I feel like people should be able to keep their most genuine face and really push for the natural beauty. But what I will say is every once in a while I will go in and I'll remove acne or things that aren't always there on their face. So he has a pimple up here, and you can come over here to the spot healing brush, and this one should be easier. You just size it with the bracket keys and you click there and just sort of make it form in. Notice how I also made a new layer so it's not affecting the layer below and ruining that layer. And let's take out that, and then we can come over here, get rid of that blemish. And then on his neck there's some acne, might as well grab that. And there's some freckles, but we're not really gonna mess with them. Over here, the girl has some acne up here. We'll just match the brush size to the acne and we'll just remove it. So yeah, so just cleaning up her face a little bit more, and we can see that it's just becoming a little bit softer and not as rough as the acne disappears while using this tool. Just always make sure you're double checking. We missed some redness right there and some spots right here in his nose and over here on her face above her eyebrows. And then we'll look at the overall, and it's a subtle change, but it does just enough that it doesn't really create any more distractions than what you need. And then I'm also noticing down here on his shirt there's a piece of hair that we can use this tool for as well. and you just gotta make sure it's around the same size, and then just drag it over, and that did a pretty good job. We'll get rid of this little speck right there, and then let's grab this hair as well. That's looking all pretty good. Grab a few more hairs on his shirt. Nice. Right on. One more. Cool. Command O to go back to the full screen image. Hitting V to go back to the main movement tool, selection tool. And yeah, there we have it. That's probably all that I would do to this image. I don't try to Photoshop any of this kind of stuff, as it makes it not natural and it really could take away from what the image is about. But if you want to go on a more advertisey, there's a few other specs right here that we could remove, like a sticker. We'll just go down here, we'll grab this stone clamp tool, grab that layer, or we can make a new layer. And of course you want to name your layers for the most part if it's enough, but let's name this one Stamp Clone. And you'll want to make sure the brush size is a good size, make sure the softness isn't too much but enough to give you detail still. And then holding Alt or Option, we want to select an area that we want to copy from. So this is a good area for there. We'll just pull it slowly, pull it down, try to cover in the blue, click down there, bring it up, continue that same motion until it's complete. So we run into a position where there's this piece coming down and we don't want to remove it. So you can just grab from like near the top still and get rid of it enough that it's not as much of a distraction. And now you're probably thinking, well, there's 3 extra pieces right here. We can just grab this piece right here and just sort of make it seem like it's not there or repeated. We can just do that as well. Here, let's try to find a better spot, like right there would probably be good. And then you notice how that came in. We can then Alt click again right here and just sort of pull out over there and really finesse how it looks. Just make sure it matches and isn't distracting. Now if you want to clean it up a little bit more, we can grab the healing brush and underneath the spot healing brush, and same thing, Alt or Option you grab, and then it will do a similar thing, but it'll just sort of fade the colors together a little bit better. And then same thing, if we want to grab over here, we'll go down to the Stamp Clone tool, start from the top, make sure that's even, and then go down and over. Click again when I get closer to make sure the light doesn't shift. And then yeah. So then we'll also go over here and we'll grab the healing brush tool again, and we'll grab a similar area and just try to fade that all in together. And yeah, there you go. So now those pieces aren't as distracting, and it can really create an easier way to not be distracted and pay attention to your subject. So there you have it, guys. We're going to make sure to hit Command Save or Command S, and then we can go back over to Lightroom and then it'll load it in. And there we go. There's the final photograph, and we can compare them to each other. This is my edit, and this is Mallory's edit. You can tell with my edit, it's a little bit on the colder side compared to Mallory's edit, where it's a little bit warmer. Another major difference is the crop, where she pulled it down and removed more of this bar up here, rather than keeping it wide. Now, looking at that crop and noticing how it cuts, you can see that it cuts off in the middle of this light, and to me that creates sort of a distraction as it's sort of cut in half. Whereas if you were to leave it like this, you can then have the balance from this to his face over here, rather than it being a little bit of a lopsided kind of feel. Overall, this is a really awesome photograph, and Mallory's edit is a good take on it, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Make sure you like, comment, or subscribe, whatever you prefer, and I'll see you in the next video.